New Jersey defense lawyer Paul Bergrin is a natural-born winner.
If you ever in trouble, there's only one guy to call, Paul Bergrin.
When he went into court, he went into war.
Objection!
His record of success is incredible.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Bergrin becomes the go-to guy for criminals looking to stay out of jail and becomes tempted by the lure of the criminal underworld.
He hung around with real killers, real murderers, gang members, major drug dealers.
Appearing to be a successful lawyer and happily married family man, Bergrin leads a double life of drug deals, mistresses, and call girls.
He'd stay out there with these girls till 4 in the morning, come back and try a case.
When Bergrin starts to take extreme measures to win unwinnable cases,
Mr. Bergrin told the drug organization, no chemo, no case.
the feds suspect that Bergrin's success isn't only down to his skill as an attorney.
Your Honor, the only witness is now dead. There is no evidence against my client.
Is Bergrin a brilliant lawyer? Or has he become more dangerous than the clients he represents? There are those in positions of power who do evil and who only think they are untouchable. The United States District Court in Newark, New Jersey. Paul Bergrin didn't start out defending criminals. In fact, his career began on the other side, putting criminals behind bars. And by 1988, he has risen to become an assistant U.S. attorney.
Things aren't looking so good for you today, you know?
At just 32 years old, Bergrin is one of the youngest federal prosecutors in the state.
This man is not a good man. He deserves to be behind bars.
He was kind of a take-no-prisoners type of lawyer. And, you know, when he went into court, he went into war.
He projected supreme confidence. He had the ability to command the attention of an audience.
You always knew if Paul was there.
Richard Roberts defended many clients prosecuted by Bergrin.
He had a good reputation as a fine lawyer.
Let's throw a bad guy in jail today. What do you say?
He had a street kind of attitude, a kind of arrogance, a cockiness, which is really good to be as a trial lawyer.
Guilty.
He knew how to win better than anybody.
Bergrin's passion for seeing that justice gets served makes him one of the best prosecuting lawyers in Newark, putting murderers, drug dealers, and gang leaders behind bars.
Becoming a member of the United States Attorney's Office is the top of the prosecutorial ladder. If you're in that job, you are recognized as a top guy.
You're dealing with all of the federal agencies, the FBI, the DEA, the Secret Service. The lawyers you're working with are, by and large, some of the best lawyers around.
Lawyers in the New Jersey DA's office have a reputation for being straight-laced Ivy League types. Bergrin couldn't be more different.
All these people like have these pictures of their children, you know. But Paul Bergrin comes in and he puts up a Playboy calendar on his wall, and like, you know, all the attorneys are going like, well, who is this? And what planet is he from?
He's telling people, hey, I came up my way and I'm doing things my way. You don't like it, too bad.
So he would like constantly put himself in a situation where, you know, he'd be the rebel. He's a rebel.
That independent streak is something Bergrin acquired growing up in a tough neighborhood.
He was born in Brooklyn. His father was a police officer.
When internal affairs officers arrest his father amid accusations of corruption, young Bergrin believes him to be innocent and the victim of a witch hunt.
His father was trying to do the job right, and he messed up a little on something, and internal affairs got on his case. I don't remember if he resigned or was thrown off the force, but caused him a lot of problems.
The incident ignites a burning passion within Bergrin, and he vows to devote his life to fighting injustice.
He went in the Army, where he became what they call a JAG officer, is like court-martial officer, and he got a lot of experience there.
After getting discharged from the Army, Bergrin puts himself through law school.
He wound up getting a law degree at a small college, not one of the big name ones, which I got the impression left a bit of a chip on his shoulder. He wound up in New Jersey at the Essex County Prosecutor's office.
It's the perfect place for Bergrin to cut his teeth as a junior prosecutor.
Essex County is, murders, drug dealing, gangs, Crips, Bloods, urban crime. And so, if you're a prosecutor in Essex County, you're a busy guy and you're dealing with a lot of cases that involve violence.
Yeah. He's a bright guy. He learned how to put people in jail because he's very competitive. And the more people you put in jail, the higher you move up the ladder.
Bergrin quickly builds a reputation as a square-jawed prosecutor of the criminal classes, and in 1987 is promoted to assistant U.S. attorney.
We all thought of Paul as a young lawyer on the way up. He was doing the right things.
He always was talking about how he's going to run for office and become a senator and this kind of stuff.
For the next 2 years, life couldn't be better for Paul Bergrin. He marries his high school sweetheart, and his many victories galvanize his lofty ambitions. But in 1989, a case comes along that will change everything.
The office he was working for was prosecuting two of his former colleagues.
Two investigators from Bergrin's old prosecutor's office in Essex County are facing corruption charges. But they're Paul's friends, and he's convinced they are being set up, just like he thought his father had been. Bergrin makes an extraordinary decision.
Paul, while he's serving in the United States Attorney's Office, appeared as a character witness for two guys who were being prosecuted by the United States Attorney's Office, which is like telling everybody that your boss is full of crap.
Paul liked these guys. They worked for him, and they were friends in the prosecutor's office, so I'm sure he felt that he had a responsibility to try and protect these guys.
That's a turning point in Paul's life.
Bergrin's whole life appears to be defined by the injustice that his father suffered and the perception that he built because of that injustice. He would have seen almost a repetition of experience in the prosecution of the people with whom he used to work and who he considered to be friends. And because of his strong ideal of standing up for injustice, he would have had almost a compulsion to fight on their behalf, regardless of the impact in his own life.
Ultimately, Bergrin's testimony doesn't help his friends
Guilty.
or his career.
Paul was a smart guy. He had to know this would be the end of his career in the U.S. Attorney's Office.
They didn't fire him, but they just wouldn't give him any cases, and he would sit there all day long. And for a guy who was like clearly a manic, kind of person like Paul Bergrin, that must have been hell.
Bergrin is sentenced to rot behind a desk. But he has other plans.
You're getting your wish. I quit. I quit.
So he basically quits, and he opened up his own law office as a defense attorney.
Going against everything he's worked for, now Bergrin will be trying to keep the bad guys out of jail. It will also lead him to take the first steps on a path to a very dark place. After testifying against his employers at the U.S. Attorney's Office, hotshot lawyer Paul Bergrin has switched sides. Instead of putting people in jail, now he's keeping them out.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul.
With his passion for doing the right thing, Bergrin reaches out to Newark's poor and marginalized to drum up business. His calling card? Injustice.
Victims of an injustice system is really what motivated him. He wanted to help people. He saw where the justice system was really failing people. People loved him.
What's your name? Michael. Michael?
Paul Bergrin is the kind of guy that would tell you what you need to know to at least attempt to protect yourself against the system, which is dead set on putting you in jail.
Call Bergrin your new friend.
Bergrin gets a reputation for being the guy who defends the underdog, like former client Ricky Danzy.
A lot of the lawyers that I know of, they wanted a retainer's fee, and then the next thing you know, they telling you, oh man, the deck is stacked against you. You know, I don't think that you should go to trial. I think that you should go ahead and plead. Let me talk to the prosecutor and see what type of deal that I can give you. A lot of those lawyers, to me, in my opinion, they're afraid to fight for their clients. But Paul, you didn't hear that from him. And I knew that he was dedicated towards winning my case for me.
I'm gonna go to war for you.
He took cases that other lawyers would have avoided.
If you study a fighter, before that bell rings, he's shaking his shoulders, he's moving from side to side, he's kicking his feet around, because he's anxious. He wants the bell to ring so he can get out there and go at his opponent. And that's the way Paul was.
He was going to really represent them and try to get them off. And he took it as a personal challenge to beat the federal government.
And beat them he does, again and again.
Thank him for your freedom. Grandchildren, your brothers, your sisters, like this man in this shop.
He was the kind of guy that once he took your case, he was your guy, and he would do anything he could to win the case for you, because he felt that most of the people he was representing were up against it. You know, they were up against the fact that they were black. They were up against the fact that they were poor. They were up against the fact that almost every single card on the table is weighted to the authorities to make convictions.
Paul had a string of murders, maybe about 33 of them in a row. And he won a lot of murder cases, and he won a lot of drug cases. So murders and drug cases, he did real good.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Not guilty.
Bergrin wins case after case in his first year as a defense lawyer. And by sticking up for the underdog, he starts to be seen as a hero among the poor and disenfranchised.
He really felt he was doing something that was important. Paul did a lot of stuff for them.
To some people, he did become a hero.
As the work flows in, Bergrin opens an office in Newark's upscale Park Place and starts enjoying the trappings of success. He even starts promising what no other attorney would dare. He guarantees the win.
If anybody guarantees you they're going to win, walk out of his office, because we can't.
He equates winning with survival.
What's next? The best.
You don't get to perpetually be a lawyer if you lose all your cases. So he has equated it to survival and has taken that to kind of the nth level in his life, that it is all-consuming for him. The more he wins, the more powerful he becomes. And he starts to see winning as the only option, and therefore would start to make decisions that may not be consistent with what he originally had done in order to secure those wins. So it becomes dangerous when someone sees winning as the motivating force versus doing the right thing as the motivating force.
Soon, Paul Bergrin's success as a defense attorney starts to attract the attention of people who are no victims of the system.
If I were a street guy and I killed somebody, I would go to Paul Bergrin, because I knew he would do everything and anything to win the case.
So once the word gets around that this guy's going to get you off, why would you go somewhere else?
Along with the deserving poor, members of the New Jersey underworld start turning up at Bergrin's office. And when Bergrin gives them the win guarantee, they make it clear they expect him to deliver. And he does, time after time. His extraordinary success rate gets other lawyers asking questions. Some of Bergrin's success is down to his willingness to go to extraordinary lengths to get an advantage.
He was always screwing all these secretaries and stuff like that. You know, he would find out inside information, you know, from the prosecutor's office. And he would also know, for instance, how much money the state had to prosecute this particular case. So he knew that if he just, you know, called for a lot of adjournments and kind of stretched the thing out, eventually they'd drop the case. Then he'd win. And he also had all these cops on his payroll because he took all these police benevolent cases, all the police brutality cases, and he got all these guys off, you know, through one way or another because he's such a great lawyer or whatever, you know, and then they loved him. So who's going to give the guy that got your buddy off even after he almost beat this guy to death? He got him off, you know, he kept his job. Of course you love that guy. You know, so Paul was like, you know, he was a smart guy, you know.
Not content with just bending the rules, Bergrin starts to break them.
There were always rumors about jury tampering. You know, Newark's small enough that you could find somebody who knew somebody who was on the jury and fix things that way.
I need you to do something for me.
I mean, some of the very best people at their craft may win 20% of their trials, maybe 30, but to win 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, you have to scratch your head and say, what's going on?
Mr. Bergrin's reputation was such that he was always known for playing close to the line, maybe closer to the line than most.
The evidence became so overwhelming that he's winning not so much on his skill, but rather by doing things like fixing juries and bribing witnesses.
People taking advantage is as old as human nature, and I think he obviously believed this was the way he was going to achieve success, by subverting the process.
Do I think it happened gradually? I'm sure it happened gradually. A course of conduct where initially he kind of went, oh, gee, did I do this? I really probably shouldn't have done that, but got away with it. Second time becomes a little easier, third, so on and so on.
It's become who he is and what he's about, fighting for justice, fighting for people who are unjustly treated. And in order to be able to make that fight, you have to win. So it's become all-encompassing for everything that he does.
In his determination to win at all costs, Bergrin has started crossing the line.
The jury reached a verdict.
Yes, we have, Your Honor. Not guilty.
As long as he gets you off, what do you care? You're already a criminal. You know, do you care what your lawyer does? You just don't want to go to jail for 500 years.
And the only reason he won the case was because the fix was in.
Certainly, if you try something perhaps overly aggressive and it works and you get away with it, the temptation the next time is to push the envelope a little farther.
Not only is winning survival, but it's also power and control, and it becomes like an addiction. And just like with anything else, the longer you get away with it, the more you justify it, and it becomes a normal part of your life.
Paul Bergrin started out determined to fight injustice. Now he's fixing juries, and his clients include some of the biggest criminals in New Jersey. And he's spending more and more time with them, even forming friendships with some.
He was known by first-name basis of all the bad guys in the city. He loved being on the streets. He would drive his Bentley in the worst sections of Newark. He represented a lot of gang guys, Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, and everybody knew it was his car, knowing that no one would touch his car because it was Paul Bergrin's car.
You know, from a financial perspective, one has to ask, how can a lawyer who represents street gang members in Newark drive a Bentley?
If you rise up from relatively modest means to driving a $200,000 car and you're representing people who sell drugs for a living, there's a disconnect there.
The more he hangs around with gangsters, the more Bergrin gets seduced by their lifestyle. The power, the money, the women.
He hung around with real killers, real murderers, you know, gang members, people like that, major drug dealers. I think he kind of fed off that image. And as he fed off that image and they started looking up to him and calling him their guy, he probably really enjoyed that.
He obviously saw clients engaging in illegal conduct that, in the short run at least, brought them excitement and wealth and women.
Impressed by the trappings of his client's glamorous lifestyle, Bergrin wants a part of it. And in early 2003, he gets his opportunity when Jason Itzler walks through the door.
So Paul, you tell me you're the man who can get things done.
Yeah, that's right.
Itzler is on parole, facing prostitution and money laundering charges.
He called himself the king of all pimps.
He hears if you ever in trouble, there's only one guy to call, Paul Bergrin. He's the king.
What's it gonna cost?
Give me 10 grand to find out.
I got 7 on me. I can give you 3 more when we get to the club.
Club.
Itzler's nightclub, New York Confidential, is a front for his high-class escort business.
We got a deal.
To Bergrin, the club is heaven. He agrees to keep the parole board off Itzler's back by pretending to give him a job as a paralegal. In return, Itzler gives him a free pass to all the club has to offer: women, booze, and drugs.
He'd stay out there in the city with these girls till 2, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, come back and try a case. I don't know how he had the energy to do all these things.
And it's a block away from where Mayor Bloomberg is like, presiding. 2 blocks from police headquarters.
We're seeing the superiority feeling starting to drive his behavior, and that his ethical code has been shaky, but it seems like maybe it's disappearing altogether now. So we're starting to see some of the traits of narcissism show up to really define who he is and to be the perspective from which he makes decisions. So it becomes dangerous because there's no kind of fixed boundary for him.
Bergrin is a married man with children, but the easy temptation on offer at New York Confidential has turned his head. Bergrin and Itzler become best buddies, and Bergrin even starts helping to run the club.
Paul was proud of that he was running this whorehouse. He gave out cards to everybody that he knew. He didn't have to be friends with him. He just, come on over, I'll get you the best.
In January 2005, the cozy arrangement hits a big problem.
Get down here.
Vice cops raid New York Confidential and arrest Itzler, charging him with running a prostitution ring. With Itzler out of circulation, Paul Bergrin stands at a crossroads. He could let the good times come to an end, or he could take the next big step towards trouble. Hotshot lawyer Paul Bergrin has become the go-to defense attorney for the New Jersey criminal underworld. His close friend, Jason Itzler, has been arrested for running a prostitution business out of a Manhattan nightclub, a place where Bergrin spends an increasing amount of time. Having been denied parole, Itzler is held at the notorious Rikers Island jail. But as one of New Jersey's top attorneys, Bergrin is perfectly placed to get Itzler back on the street.
Itzler had no problems whatsoever because he had the greatest single lawyer in the world. And he says, he's gonna get me out and he's gonna embarrass all these cops and everything like that.
But Itzler is in for a nasty surprise.
The phone calls to his lawyer were no longer getting returned.
Paul refused to show up on any of Itzler's court dates, so he was letting Itzler rot in Rikers Island so he could take over the whorehouse business completely by himself.
In an extraordinary move, Bergrin leaves his so-called friend to his fate and assumes ownership of the club, including its illegal escort business.
Which is really crazy. The idea that this guy is running this enormous prostitution ring that he stole from a guy who billed himself as the king of all pimps is just really insane. So it just seems that once it started, the acceleration was really, really rapid, and there was no turning back.
By day, he's a lawyer. By night, he's a pimp and club owner.
Lawyers mostly are honest and keep the system working in an honest way, but occasionally lawyers cheat. This went way beyond anything that any of us have ever seen in New Jersey.
He had metallic cards printed with the name of the prostitution house on it.
And it was like this steel thing. He said, it's the best single business card for cutting up cocaine. and it said "Rocket Fuel for Winners." That was his slogan.
He gave it out to everybody in the courthouse.
See you sometime.
Got me in a lot of trouble. He gave me one and I put it in a console, and my wife found it months after, and I promise I never went, thank God. He used to ask me all the time to go, and he would tell me, well, Richie, you want 2 girls, you want 3 girls, whatever you want, come on. I said, no, Paul, 2 or 3 girls might kill me at this stage. I don't want to do that.
And I think one of these cards turned up in Bloomberg's office.
He was an egomaniac.
Bergrin has flings with many of the women connected with the club, and eventually one of the relationships becomes more serious.
I mean, that's another one of the things about, the duality of Bergrin. Here's a guy who's married, he lives in a nice place down in South Jersey, yet he's up in Essex County leading this second life where he's got a mistress.
He met this young girl who really, for all intents and purposes, was his wife.
And she's right in the middle of everything with him. They were together all the time.
Bergrin and his mistress soon become so inseparable, she is assumed by many to be his wife.
He bought her all kind of very expensive gifts, so he made no pretense about it. I said, you're buying a house for your girlfriend? He said, yeah, what about your wife? He said, don't worry about it.
But there's more to Bergrin's girlfriend than meets the eye.
Her father's a major player in the cocaine business.
Bergrin sees an opportunity to make a lot of money. Using his contacts in the New Jersey underworld, he starts acting as a go-between in drug deals.
He started making his own connections and introducing other people to his connections to move large quantities of cocaine, kilogram-sized quantities of cocaine.
From the courthouse by tomorrow morning.
For a period of time, he was using intermediaries, but at times he would actually do it himself.
He went from representing drug dealers to becoming a drug dealer.
$250 grand here,
Oh, baby.
The mistress was kind of like his lieutenant as he goes forward with these various crimes.
He would deliver duffel bags full of kilograms of cocaine to somebody that was going to distribute. He made some major connections through the client base that he had.
Ah, that's my girl. Oh, I love it.
Oh, that makes you guilty.
While his drug business booms, Bergrin is having to take increasingly drastic measures to keep his clients out of prison. Newark, 2003. Kimo McCrae is an informant for the DEA and helps the feds arrest a major street dealer. What the feds don't know is that the dealer works for a drug kingpin who retains the services of Paul Bergrin.
What's up, Bruce, coming in?
William.
I'm going down, man. They got a witness.
The case against the dealer is so strong that Bergrin knows he has no chance of getting an acquittal.
Tear witnesses apart, that's what I do.
But he has made promises to some of the most dangerous underworld figures in New Jersey that he can always keep his clients out of jail. It's a dilemma.
So at that point, Paul Bergrin has got a choice to make. He could either forget about it, not do anything.
Instead, Bergrin makes a truly shocking move. He makes contact with fellow gang members of the accused dealer.
Mr. Bergrin told the drug organization, quote, no chemo, no case, unquote. Meaning, if Kimo McCrae were to be eliminated as a witness, then the government would be unable to proceed with its case.
He went to the gang members of his client, who was in jail, and said, listen, he's going to go to jail, he's going to die in jail, unless Kimo McCrae, who's the key informant, is killed.
He obviously didn't care for the rules. He just felt that, like, you know, I've taken on this case, and I'm gonna win it, because I don't want to lose. I hate to lose. And it doesn't make a difference how I win, I just want to win.
One of the gang members agrees to carry out the hit.
He walked up behind Mr. McCrae as Mr. McCrae was walking down a street, pulled out a gun, placed it to the back of Mr. McCrae's head, and pulled the trigger. And then walked away.
Paul had, in effect, murdered this guy by telling the bad guys who was testifying.
There was no turning back after that. The other stuff, the other crimes, doesn't compare to the idea that a defense attorney ordered the cold-blooded street execution of a federal witness.
Paul had no moral compass whatsoever.
To move up to murder, to orchestrating murder, to talk about murder, suggests that he has made a decision that he needs what he needs at all costs. He disregards human life, that it really just serves a purpose for him or prevents him from getting what he wants. Therefore, it's disposable.
I am a proprietor of a whorehouse. I could have people killed if I want to. And I try cases and win too.
I would suspect that he feels no remorse or guilt in order to so callously disregard a human life.
The murder of McCrae marks a dark turning point for Bergrin. Soon he begins arranging the elimination of witnesses in other cases. 22-year-old Sarita Lee is about to testify against the man who shot and killed her boyfriend. The only problem is the gunman is a client of Paul Bergrin.
You a snitch.
Now, with no witness, the case against the gunman falls apart.
Your Honor, the only witness is Sarita Lee. She's now dead. There is no evidence against my client.
Bergrin is feeling untouchable. The deadly catchphrase, "no witness, no case," becomes his new calling card. A brazen advertisement of his services to every criminal in Newark and beyond.
I suggest we dismiss all charges against Mr. Dawson.
Some grateful clients even get the slogan tattooed on their body. Bergrin's new catchphrase also gets the attention of his former colleagues at the U.S. Attorney's Office, who have been hearing rumors about other dubious activities involving Bergrin.
Here's a guy who embarrassed us, number one, by testifying for somebody we're prosecuting. And number two, now we have a former U.S. attorney allegedly doing all of these criminal acts, becoming one of the biggest drug dealers in the county, guy killing witnesses, running whorehouses, all these different things.
Here on the bed, Joker's over here on the other side. Scattering yours. Keep an eye out.
The attorney's office gets a break when a wiretap on a drug dealer captures a conversation between the dealer and Paul Bergrin.
There was a wiretap, and in the wiretap was intercepted by the government that Paul was talking to a major player, and Paul said at some point, you know, no chemo, no case. Chemo was murdered a couple weeks after that, and the government attributed that to Paul.
They were trying to make this case against Bergrin, and they had him.
With the wiretap, the feds have enough evidence to put Bergrin behind bars. Or at least, they should have. Once a promising assistant U.S. attorney, Paul Bergrin has turned down a dark path and become House Counsel for New Jersey's criminal organizations.
He's running a drug operation through his office and ordering murders out of his office and running a prostitution ring out of his office.
They respected him as an extension of their organization, as someone as tough as they were. He wasn't a lawyer. This was a criminal enterprise, and he was a gangster at the top of the pyramid.
What's good news?
In 2004, federal prosecutors think they have enough evidence to link him to the murder of a witness. But disaster strikes. The wiretap evidence is mishandled, making it inadmissible.
I don't know what the particular problem was, but there was a violation of the rules of evidence. It could have been chain of custody of the recordings. It could have been authenticity of the recordings. But there was a legal technicality that forestalled their ability to use it.
They were trying to make this case against Bergrin had somehow done something wrong with the evidence. He didn't follow the proper procedure, and the case was dropped. So that even made them more pissed off, because now they had him, and he's going around going like, you couldn't even take care of your own evidence. Gee whiz, guy, you guys are really sharp.
Well, I think if you get away with something and nobody even looks your way, it emboldens you. But if you get away with something, knowing that they're looking at you and they just goofed up handling evidence, that should be a warning shot across your bow.
Rather than taking the near miss as a warning, Bergrin feels unstoppable. For the next 3 years, he continues to act with impunity. The not guilty verdicts continue to come thick and fast, as do the parties, the money, and the women. But the feds haven't forgotten about him.
Once you piss off the U.S. Attorney's Office, they will do anything they can to get you. He's already on the dark side to begin with. And then he starts beating them in court, and gloating about it. These people are gonna get you.
Finally, in 2007, they make something stick. They have evidence linking Bergrin to illegal activity at the New York Confidential Club. He's arrested and charged with money laundering, conspiracy, promoting prostitution, and misconduct by an attorney.
When he was arrested, he asked somebody to go to the trunk of his Bentley. He had some money in there to get for his bail. And the individual went, and there was $800,000 of cash in the trunk of his car.
When he was charged in New York, he faced a loss of his license to practice law. So he had to take it very seriously.
Judge, I'm willing to take a plea.
Bergrin knows the justice system inside out, and that prosecutors will often take a plea bargain rather than risk losing in court.
To a lesser charge.
He wanted to outthink the powers that be. He thought that he was the smartest guy in the world.
Attorney misconduct. Lesser charge of misconduct.
He offers a deal. He'll plead to the misdemeanor charges if the felony charges are dropped. His plan works. Not only does Bergrin avoid jail time, he keeps his license to practice law.
When someone's narcissistic qualities and tendencies are allowed to run unchecked, they do become the point of reference for everything else. So there's no reason to see the world any other way, and that takes over his life.
Mr. Estevez, you got yourself in a sticky situation here, huh?
In July 2008, Bergrin sees an opportunity to further expand his criminal activities. He is representing Vicente Estevez, who is looking at a life sentence for drug running.
Estevez was indicted by the federal government as a drug dealer.
I understand you have connections with the Colombians. They have some connections.
Estevez has direct connections to the drug manufacturers in Colombia. Bergrin offers a deal. If Estevez connects him to the Colombians, Bergrin will make sure the federal informant testifying against him never makes the stand.
That would have made him bigger than life with the drug dealers from other countries if he had this guy killed.
See you around. Thanks, Paul.
It was to prove that he could do it.
Bergrin flies to Chicago. He meets with Estevez's associate to plan the hit.
To get Estevez out of jail, I need you to ice someone for me.
He said, make it look like a robbery. Open the drawers and throw clothes around and things like that so they'll think it was a robbery.
But then Bergrin drops a shocking bombshell.
One thing, I want to come with you.
So far, Bergrin's involvement in murder has been at arm's length. Now, he wants to see it up close.
People ask why he would want to get involved in an actual hit. And the only conclusion I could come to was he wanted to do it for the thrill of doing it.
Taking a human life is the ultimate act of power and control. And hearing about it is one thing, but he's obviously graduated to the point where that's not enough to satisfy him, that he wants kind of a front row seat to his own power and control.
Once a passionate lawyer, Paul Bergrin has now taken a disturbing step towards becoming a cold-blooded killer. But with his latest outrageous plan, he may have taken a step too far. Corrupt defense attorney Paul Bergrin has been arranging for witnesses to be killed to keep his clients out of jail.
One thing, I want to come with you.
Now, in a horrifying escalation, Bergrin wants to have a direct hand in the next murder. However, Bergrin will live to regret his choice of partner for the hit.
What Bergrin did not know is that he was cooperating with the DEA. And he recorded just about every conversation he had with Bergrin.
Thanks to a wire, the feds have finally got evidence on rogue lawyer Paul Bergrin that could put him away for good.
Here. All right, let's see what we got here.
I need you to do something for me, Oscar. Oh, yeah? What's up? To get Estevez out of jail, I need you to ice someone for me.
For the government to uncover a plot as pernicious as this plot involving the murder of witnesses made it as high a priority case as the federal prosecutor's office can have.
Bergrin is arrested, and in October 2011 appears in court facing 23 charges, including racketeering, witness tampering, drug trafficking, and murder.
They've got all this wiretap information against you, and they even got you on the wire with you telling the fake hitman that you're supposedly hiring that you'd like to go along on the hit and see what it's like. But Paul goes in there against the feds in a case that they're desperate to win.
Bergrin fights the charges with his usual vigor.
Well, he's a good lawyer. I don't think anybody would say he's not a good lawyer. I mean, one of the things he did at trial, which was a smart move, was by representing himself, he was able to present his version of the facts to the jury at length with no interruption and no cross-examination. So I think that's a good illustration of how his mind worked legally.
Thank you for your time.
He went full bore with the prosecutors. He went full bore with their witnesses.
A few times. How many is a few times? Is that 2? Is that 3? Is that 4?
He went toe-to-toe with the judge.
Objection!
Arrogance, thought he was the best trial lawyer in the world.
What do those tattoos mean? You kill someone?
He's intimately familiar with the law and the way the law works, so he knows the potential is there for the established legal system to reach out and take him down. But he still has that sense of entitlement and grandiosity that suggests to him that that's not going to happen.
Prosecutors have persuaded some of his closest cohorts to testify against him.
Correct.
Even his longtime mistress.
When you are facing the rest of your life in jail, in today's criminal world, you're gonna flip. Everybody flips.
Finally, they produced their real trump card. The recording of Bergrin planning the hit.
I need you to do something for me, Oscar. Oh, yeah? What's up? To get Estevez out of jail, I need you to ice someone for me. It's gotta look like a home invasion. Okay. Cannot look like a hit. You understand? Consider it done.
You can always cross-examine a witness. You can't cross-examine a tape.
When I found out and then read what he had been recorded saying to this guy, it disgusted me.
In a final roll of the dice, the toast of New Jersey's criminal underworld is forced to plead for mercy.
I tried to be there for the underdog, downtrodden, destitute. All I wanted to do was help people. Those who are less fortunate.
At certain points, he was literally begging the jury to acquit him.
Please don't let this happen.
It was really quite a performance. I think it lasted 3.5 hours. I'm sure he would have happily gone for a couple of days.
On March 18th, 2013, after only 2 days of deliberation, the jury returns with a unanimous verdict.
The jury found him guilty of all 23 charges.
Paul Bergrin is sentenced to 6 life sentences for promoting prostitution, cocaine trafficking, racketeering, and murder. And with no parole in the federal system, he will spend the rest of his life behind bars.
I see Paul Bergrin as somebody with narcissistic personality disorder traits that could have been used very successfully in his line of work, but whose obsession with power and control brought him down. The very traits that could have made him incredibly successful, in fact, made him quite a failure.
He had the capacity to be a successful lawyer. Perhaps not a Bentley driving, Brioni wearing superstar, but certainly he could have been a successful lawyer by any measure in this area.
The idea that this attorney who takes an oath to uphold the law had turned his law office into a racketeering enterprise is kind of stunning and unprecedented.
Paul was doing whatever it took, tampering with evidence, tampering with witnesses, killing witnesses. Whatever was necessary to get the result, it appears he was willing to do.
There's no place for it, and there's no place for sympathy.
He had totally, completely lost his way. Totally. Not only as a lawyer, but as a human being, he lost his way.
He had no conscience. He could not have a conscience and did what he did. He was a good guy who went bad. Simple as that.
Justice may have been delayed, but it was not denied. Paul Bergrin thought he was untouchable. He was wrong.